Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. That is Joel C. Cordes. Joel, thanks for being aboard the podcast again, my friend. Good to see you.
It is wonderful to be here. And this is episode 54. And my goodness, is it just going to be difficult to pick somebody out of this group?
Is it? Well, in the meantime, while we're trying to pick somebody for the namesake of this episode, a very interesting episode, I should say, before we even get to the content. Notice I said it was nice to see you because, Joel, people can see us seeing each other on the worldwide internet web. And how can they do it?
Yeah, check out Basketball by Association on YouTube if you're not already there. Please give us a like, a subscribe, a share, all that good stuff. We just launched the YouTube channel not too long ago, trying to get that off the ground. We could really use your help with that. Would absolutely love and appreciate that. Of course, if you are watching us on YouTube and maybe that's not your thing on a certain day, you're at the gym, whatever, you're in the car, you can't do the YouTubes and you want the audio version, we are on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere that you get your podcasts. Be sure to check that out. And of course, the like, subscribe, share, all that stuff over there as well. We really appreciate you. So, all right, I've settled on someone, and in this case, it's a little bit settling. But 54 is kind of it's an obscure number. You know that it's going to be big men mostly, right? Centers and power forwards. It's a lot of guys in the 80s and 90s that wore it, but nobody that really jumps out as, like a star. And we've already had a Kwame Brown episode. He did wear 54 at a different point in his career, so we're not going to do that twice. But how about another draft bust? We're not gonna knock on him though. Rest in peace. He was a fantastic college player. I do remember liking him a lot. He was so highly touted. Robert Tractor Trailer. We're going to call this the Tractor Trailer episode. A big guy, Arky, after your own heart. This was a guy that, he did some damage in college.
He did, and I think it's appropriate that we go with the big guy like that when big guys are in the news. Recently, some of them are dunking on their old teammates and staring them down. Some of them are, as soon as they get half a second free, are about to sign with the Lakers, and some of them are breaking their feet. So, it's
And in Tractor Trailer's case, forever linked with Dirk Nowitzki. Traded for Dirk on draft night. Dirk could have been a Milwaukee Buck, and instead he winds up on the Dallas Mavericks as part of their rebuild, and Tractor Trailer only played 2 years in Milwaukee, then played a year in Cleveland as well. So a career cut short, a life cut short. But a lot of really good pre-NBA memories with Tractor Trailer.
100%. I can vouch for that on the college game especially. Okay, Joel, so this one's sort of up in the air for me because I don't want to talk about the results on the court because there's so little to discuss when it comes to all the newness of these teams. But we had, Joel, statistically, the busiest trade deadline day, Joel, that we've ever had.
Was it really?
It was.
So
here are the statistics. The busiest trade deadline ever. We had 17 trades, which is by far the most. I think by 4.
Wow.
The number of teams that were trading was 23, which is also 4 more than the next most. The number of players traded was 45 total players. And I thought this statistic from Todd Whitehead, Ed Crumpled Jumper, also put this one out there. The percent of league win shares traded is the second most of all time. 5.7% of total league win production was traded at the deadline. We had a super busy deadline, and we thought there'd be some moves, but Joe, we didn't see this coming.
No, and I knew it was a busy day, and I knew there was a lot of moving parts. I did not realize the historic nature of it, or especially the win share side of it is what blows my mind, even beyond the total teams and total players and all that stuff, because when you look at most of the guys who were moved, it's role players, which is typically what happens on trade deadline day. There's some big names in there, and we'll get to those, of course. But it didn't feel like that many high-level impact guys, but I suppose when you've got the quantity of players going, they're going to pull some quality along with them too. But that one blows my mind. I can't believe that.
Yeah, that's only second to 2015 when 5.9% of the win shares were traded. So, Joel, let's. I guess we could start with. I don't know. Do you want to start with the biggest, or do you want to start with the most recent, which isn't even in a trade? We're talking about dudes who are being bought out and allowed to go sign elsewhere.
Let's start with that, the most recent news, and then we'll talk. That long-term impact, that go-forward impact of the trade deadline, since that's a couple days in the rearview mirror.
Well, I guess then we're talking about Andre Drummond. And the fact that Andre Drummond gave a big thank you to Cleveland as he was bought out with a nice Did you see the picture he posted, by the way?
I did not.
It was a very cool picture of him sort of on the bench with the lights right above his head as he was about to be introduced in pregame introductions.
Oh, no, I did see that. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
Sort of very cool photograph that was taken, and he thanked Cleveland, but he's going to go to very quiet Los Angeles, it looks like. And, I will say this. I thought that Boston was going to be a very real player, and apparently they were. And the Knicks were rumored to be kind of interested, but they already had 3 big men they were trying to figure out. And literally, as that was being reported, like an hour later, Mitchell Robinson breaks his foot, and one of the big men is out. And you're like, oh, hey, maybe they should make another call real quick just to see. But Andre Drummond's got his pick of the litter, and it looks like Los Angeles is where he's going to go, man.
Yeah, and I called it, right? I called that 2 weeks ago. I said this is the front runner and where he's probably going to wind up. And it does make a lot of sense. He would have made sense in Brooklyn. We can talk a little bit more about LaMarcus Aldridge, another all-star winding up with the Nets. We'll get to that in a minute.
Another dude leaving money on the table just to go, just to go play elsewhere.
Yeah, it's not a bad gig. There's still plenty of money in the wallet out of it. But Drummond is going to be pressed into immediate service with Los Angeles, of course. Down Anthony Davis, not sure when he's going to be back. Down LeBron James, not sure when he's going to be back. In a dogfight in the Western Conference, as typically happens in the West, but the Lakers have slid to 4th now. They're 5.5 games out of first place. And a guy like Drummond, we know what a rebound hound he is. We know that that's not as important in today's NBA, but on that Lakers team, right now, you're going to be able to run some offense through him. He is a good screen setter. He's a decent defender, certainly doesn't stretch the floor, and certainly a guy that you try to put in pick and roll when you can, but he's mobile. He's young enough. He's going to absolutely rack up stats the way that he did. And there's a lot of missed shots right now in LA when you don't have Anthony Davis and you don't have LeBron James. So those missed shots turn into offensive rebounds and garbage putbacks. My only concern for Drummond is how he fits with Montrezl Harrell. And I spoke about this, I think, a week ago. Harrell does a lot of the same things, especially on the offensive glass, that Davis does. Or that Drummond does, excuse me. So you are going to have to separate those guys as much as you can, but both have to play 30 minutes a game. So there's going to be significant overlap. And what happens to spacing in those moments? Neither is a guy that you want stepping away from outside of 10, 12 feet, although Drummond has been trying to do that a little bit more over the last 2 seasons. So how that spacing fits and whether you've got diminishing returns during a portion of the game is really going to be interesting to see. Like I said before, when Anthony Davis comes back and gives you that stretchier guy, I'm not as worried about it. But for right now, the Lakers needed reinforcements. They needed live bodies up in front, and Andre Drummond is more than overqualified to come in on a veteran minimum, essentially. This is an all-star that we're talking about.
I was just going to ask you, because of the most recent injuries, if there were not those injuries, if AD was still playing and LeBron was still playing and they were playing at a high level and showing no signs of it, is this recruitment of Andre Drummond nearly as successful? Do you think that there's someone else like a Boston might have had a better chance at getting his services? Maybe even would the Lakers even have pushed as hard?
I think the allure of playing with LeBron James and the allure of playing with the Lakers, and if those aforementioned injuries don't happen, the Lakers are probably 1st or 2nd in the West, right? They haven't slid so far. So that actually makes them more attractive. So I think if Drummond was leaning towards LA, it was probably the Lakers and Brooklyn all along. If Brooklyn had not already signed Blake Griffin and then were not in the hunt for LaMarcus Aldridge, and though Aldridge signed first with the Nets, it's hard to know whether he was their first choice or whether they kind of already knew that Drummond was maybe on his way to the Lakers. So from Drummond's standpoint, I don't think it changes things that much. From the Lakers standpoint, if Anthony Davis is healthy, I think Drummond still makes a ton of sense because Marc Gasol does look like he's on his last legs as an NBA player. Getting another live body, a guy that you can throw lobs to, a guy that just is gritty inside. The Lakers can use more of that in spades, especially because Anthony Davis does not want to play center. It allows Kyle Kuzma to play a little bit at the 3 when they want to go big. Markieff Morris can do a little bit of that too. You still have that diminishing level of return with the overlap between him and Harrell, but I don't think it changes things all that much. The only wild card out of that would have been if the Nets would have held off on Griffin and would have been, making Drummond know that he was their number one priority. He may have made a little bit more sense with the Nets, but that's about it.
And we wouldn't have got had that happen. We wouldn't have gotten the cool stare down by Blake Griffin after a lob dunk in the fourth quarter of that game against Detroit. Kind of cold blooded though, like kind of a little unnecessarily cold blooded for a team that some people think. Some people, I was reading some Detroit tweeters and bloggers. Some people thought that Blake Griffin quit on him, and to have that happen to you for a team that scores 1 trillion points a game,
it's and that quit is a two-way street. It does happen where a team is not doing well, and a veteran guy knows, probably through his agent, probably just through common sense by that point, and maybe the organization has told him that it's likely they're either going to get shut down or get moved to a different team. So you don't push it when you've got those little nagging injuries and you sit. But at the same time, teams who are on the verge of a tank or on the verge of trying to move that guy, they encourage that. They sit that guy anyway. All of a sudden, they're very, very cautious because it's going to do them no good if he does get hurt for real, seriously, and then they can't flip him as an asset. Or, look at what the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing with Al Horford. They were not able to move him at the deadline. A buyout may or may not come, but he's been told, hey, you're getting shut down for the foreseeable future. Like, you will not play here again. And he could be valuable. He proved he had some value left already this year. So Detroit can be as mad as they want to be, and there might be like an ounce of truth to all that, but it is definitely a two-way street when that happens.
It is, and you can be mad at all you want if you are Al Horford or Blake Griffin or the fans. But honestly, you can lessen that madness if you literally go to manscaped.com and get anything on that website, including the performance package, for 20% off and free shipping. It's all thanks to our partnership with manscaped.com. We got a promo code for you coming up in just a moment to tell you how you get 20% off and free shipping. But how about the Performance Package 3.0, which is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle? And if you're watching the NCAA tournament, if you just saw Gonzaga as the number 1 seed do something good, don't worry about them. The number 1 real overall seed is the Performance Package, which also has the Lawnmower 3.0, where you want to be careful around your places that need to be careful around. Well, that's what this is all about. You know that you should stop thinking right now and go to manscaped.com and just use the promo code BRAWL, BRAWL, and you can get 20% off plus free shipping. Did I mention there are underwears that come from Manscaped in this package? Because we got free gifts for you too, son. Manscaped.com, promo code BRAWL, BRAWL. That's 20% off and free shipping. And they got proprietary skin-safe technology. So normal razors, normal shavers, no, danger. Do not have skin-safe technology. Manscaped does with the Lawnmower 3.0. So go take advantage for promo code BRAWL, BRAWL, right now at Manscaped.com. You mentioned LaMarcus Aldridge, who also just quietly gets to leave and leave San Antonio, and looks like he's going to, let's see, this team that hasn't done much this offseason. Is it the Timberwolves? No, it's the Brooklyn Nets. Sorry, it's the Brooklyn Nets.
That hurt. That was uncalled for. That was almost like a Knicks joke. It was so uncalled for.
Well, I don't get to throw much shade lately. like I mean, in like the last decade, I got to throw it twice, right? But yeah. So going to Brooklyn, where the rich get richer, and it does sort of seem like that there is a thoroughbred race on either side of the bracket when it comes to the East and the West. The East looks downright dirty and difficult and tough at the top to sort of get out of this year. And we may be talking about for the first time sort of in a while that the East will be the toughest top-heavy to get out of than the West. So Brooklyn doing more damage, man.
And, Stephen A. Smith is probably getting suspicious. I'm suspicious. He's concerned that the Nets are trying to steal a championship, but you know what? It ain't stealing if the riches are just walking right into your mailbox like that.
That's true.
And that's what's going on.
LaMarcus didn't have to sign.
No. He was not heisted from anyone. The Spurs bought him out. And how much does LaMarcus Aldridge have left in the tank? Probably about proportional to what Blake Griffin healthy does in the tank, which is to say they are valuable still, just in smaller doses. LaMarcus Aldridge, former All-Star, one of the most unguardable moves of this generation. Doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but that left over the turn jumper, that over the shoulder jumper, that turnaround out of the left side, it is pretty much as guardable as Dirk Nowitzki's very famous Flamengo leg shot, backing up. He's built a career out of that, has Aldridge, and was always a solid rebounder, not a great defender, but good enough. It is good for Brooklyn, as we've talked about. They needed live bodies up front. They needed guys with playoff experience. They were really young and really shallow up front, even before they had to swing the trade that brought James Harden, and then they lose Jarrett Allen. Certainly, neither Aldridge nor Griffin is going to bring that defensive grit or even that finishing above the basket anymore that Allen provides, although we saw Blake Griffin can do a little bit of that still. But just, again, having a steady hand who's been in playoff battles, who can make a shot. Griffin, I think you run the offense through. Aldridge, you run the offense to. Like, you want the ball to wind up in his hands, and you want him to get some touches. Again, I don't love this move, though, for Brooklyn the way that a lot of other people do. I think Aldridge being added, there is a name, but there's, again, overlap. There's diminishing returns because he does a lot of the same things that Griffin brings to you. And I would have liked to see Brooklyn just add a grittier guy, a more athletic guy. It's weird for me to say this, but once they had Blake Griffin aboard, getting somebody like Andre Drummond would have been a coup. But even getting somebody like JaVale McGee would have made more sense for them than Aldridge.
And Denver got him.
Yeah, just because that's a guy who's going to block some shots, who's going to finish above the rim, who's going to sit in the dunker spot. That's not really what LaMarcus Aldridge does. So helpful, yes. Certainly, the Nets have so many different shot makers at this point. But shot stoppers, they could have used another one of those. So it's not just DeAndre Jordan kind of sitting there having to do all that work. And beyond him, you've got Bruce Brown, who's a really good defender, and you've got Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot, who is a decent defender, and Kevin Durant, who's a more than decent defender. But we know what the Nets mantra is right now, and it's score more points than everybody else.
Yeah, and I mean, so we always talk about the difference between now basketball and playoff basketball, and it does sort of seem like that the defense for Brooklyn has gotten a skosh better. But we also don't still know what the totality of that team looks like. I mean, every time you even start to get anything going, Kyrie's out for personal issues, or Kevin Durant's still out, or James Harden has neck soreness, and like all of a sudden we're still not figuring out what this Brooklyn team is, and they're still just stacking W's.
And remember last season how stacked the Clippers looked, right? An embarrassment of riches. Mm-hmm. But they rarely got all of those guys together. And that lack of chemistry showed when all of a sudden they got into some tough series with the Mavericks and then with the Nuggets, teams that had been playing together more cohesively as a unit all year. They were definitely not more talented than the Clippers were, but it showed. And that's my concern for the Nets. As good as James Harden has been, and he has held down the fort, and now James Harden has even picked up on what I've been saying for almost a month at this point, that he absolutely has to be in the MVP conversation with his ability to keep them afloat. But it has been that revolving door, and when the time comes, when they get into that tough playoff series, if they're healthy, they will have more than enough shot makers. But that, again, is where a guy like JaVale McGee, who you don't run plays for, he just finds the ball. And on both ends of the court, like, can LaMarcus Aldridge be effective if the ball is not finding him for long stretches? Like, yeah, he's a big body and he knows what to do. Good, solid veteran player. And I think with James Harden's unselfishness, and Kyrie has shown the ability to do that, and the fact that defenses will be so stacked against Durant and Harden and Irving, you're going to have guys like Griffin and Aldridge being able to eat for free at the buffet table. Joe Harris is going to be able to do that even more than he already does. So that's helpful. But what happens when the ball doesn't find Aldridge? We already saw that a little bit in San Antonio, and the numbers are like at career low levels for LaMarcus. So it's a nice move. I don't love it. Had it been Blake Griffin going elsewhere, and then the Nets wound up with Aldridge, I would feel a lot more positively about this, but it still feels like they're a gritty guy short up front.
Okay, so there is a bunch I still want to talk about, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on a lot of these, but...
Okay. Duly noted. I get the warning.
No, because there's one we need to spend a decent chunk amount on.
All right.
That's what Orlando's doing, because Orlando just straight up blew it up, man. Orlando started the trade deadline final day with a bang, with their deal with the Bulls and sending Nikola Vucevic, and
let's just say they put the whole cherry bomb in the toilet. That's what happened, right? Because that's where the Orlando Magic were.
We'll mention, because by now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a fan of the NBA and you sort of already know what's sort of gone on. But just the idea that Orlando basically went all in and saying, yeah, this just isn't working right now, man. People winning out. People don't like it here. We're not winning the games we think we thought we might be able to at some point. Let's go get as much stuff as we possibly can.
And this is why, if you're watching this show and you have other friends who like the NBA, please tell them about us. Get them to like, subscribe, do it yourself, share, whatever you got to do. Because I'm telling you, folks, we called this. We called this before the season even began.
That's right.
We called it throughout the season.
The only thing we did call was Chicago would be the team that was going to sort of be the one that make that big move first for someone like Vooch. But we did say beginning of the year, Orlando, no moves in the offseason. So what are you thinking?
Right. Looming toilet flush was what was looming. And that's what we saw, even though they got off to a semi-hot start for the first 10 games of the season.
3 or something.
Yeah, it was something silly. First of all, and this is how bland and blah the Magic are. They needed to do that. It happened. I'm happy for them. Hopefully they'll figure out where they're going forward. But I don't really even care about who they got back. Like Otto Porter Jr. has been a reclamation project in a couple of different spots. Wendell Carter Jr., I think, could have a future there, but Mo Bamba is still waiting in the wings, and Jonathan Isaac is still waiting in the wings, and those guys need minutes. So Orlando did the right thing by getting younger. I really wish, for Terrence Ross's sake, that they would have been able to move him. Evan Fournier, who they moved to the Boston Celtics, that was a definitely a needed move for Boston. We had talked about how they needed a shot in the arm at the wings. I like Evan Fournier, kind of a really multifaceted guard who can handle the ball a little bit. He can shoot. I would have loved to see Terrence Ross as just a spark plug guy who can play above the rim and also can some threes. I would have loved Terrence Ross in Boston even more than Evan Fournier, honestly, because that's what the Celtics need. They need like some shock value. They need some spark, some punch. So I feel bad for T. Ross that he's stuck there in Orlando, probably just for the second half of this season, and you'll see him move on during the offseason. But that's it. Like, RJ Hampton wasn't going to get burned in Denver, so maybe there's a path forward. Markelle Fultz is still there, number one pick who is playing better after his first set of whatever injuries those were, and now, saddled with injury again. Cole Anthony was doing all right. So there's some young guys there, and that's fine.
Are we just going to skip over the white hot shooting Chuma Okeke from Auburn University?
Yes, we are. I know you love Auburn, but
he was like 8 of 8 in his first game, and then 5 of his first 5 in the second game. I guess since the trade.
More power to him, and use those minutes and carve an NBA career for yourself. But is he more than a rotation level player? I don't see it yet. But
wait, hold on this Orlando team?
Yeah. Is he honestly
on this particular Orlando team?
Right now, no. You can run the offense through it, but when Jonathan Isaac gets back,
no, that's different. That's different. But this minute.
This is a tanking Orlando team at the end of a season, a lost season. So this is where guys like Okeke get to eat. And you know what? And I will say this. Christian Wood got to eat last year on a Pistons team in a very similar situation, and he turned that into a big contract and a big role for himself with someone else. That is the gold standard. That's the dream. And for a guy like Okeke, that is exactly what you use these minutes for, and you hope for the best. I don't see more than that. But again, we didn't see that really with Christian Wood either. So strange things can happen. These are all very, very talented elite athletes, and sometimes you just need those minutes. I do want to talk about the fact that for Chicago, Vucevic is a coup. Daniel Tice is a coup to be able to upgrade your center spot from Wendell Carter Jr., who is quickly falling out of favor, and then Luke Cornett, essentially, and Daniel Gafford. And Gafford has some upside. I love that Gafford wound up with, I got to remember where he wound up. Cornett goes to the Celtics, and that was useful. You may have to help me out here as I pontificate, but Daniel Gafford wound up in a good situation where he's going to get some run. Where did he go?
Washington, right?
Washington, yes. Yeah. There we go. Perfect. So they needed help. Washington needed help with Thomas Bryant out for the season, and Robin Lopez, Alex Len, not giving them much of anything. Gafford is going to get some run there. That's nice for him. But for the Bulls to be able to move on from 3 guys really who weren't moving the needle to an all-star caliber center, a veteran, and Daniel Tice, who's a really nice role player and is going to back him up. That is a major, major upgrade when all you essentially got rid of was Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter Jr., 2 guys who were quickly falling out of that rotation. It did not result in a win the other night. The Bulls still lost to a well-drilled Spurs team, and I don't know if it gets them into the playoffs this year, although that's clearly what they're gunning for, and it should. But the pieces are there in Chicago, as we've said for a couple of years. And for Boston, like I mentioned before, they needed help at the guard spot. They moved on a little bit. Robert Williams has the keys to the car at the center spot. That's exactly what should happen. Tristan Thompson is there, backing him up. And then you've got Moritz Wagner and Luke Cornett as 2 guys who can give you a couple minutes if you need it. But Evan Fournier has played as a fringe all-star caliber player for a few seasons in Orlando and even in Denver before that. Is it enough to get Boston over the hump? I don't know, but at least they did something. I wish they would have gotten T. Ross or another guy who is just kind of that spark plug level player. But Fournier is really, really solid and doesn't get in the way of anything they do.
I think Boston did a good job or good thing by getting rid of Daniel Tice to somewhere like Chicago where he'll be more utilized and I think a better fit with Chicago. I think that works out well for both sides. So the Magic send Vucevic, Fournier, and how about my pick of the Denver Nuggets, huh? They get Aaron Gordon, brother. Listen, Denver's already dangerous. You don't want to be sending Aaron Gordons all over the place. Huh?
No, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Denver was a team that started out so slow and yet had something going here over the last few weeks, had climbed not only back into the playoff race, but are in the hunt again for home court advantage. But they still felt like they needed that shot in the arm, right? After losing a couple of key guys over the offseason, namely Jeremy Grant, a guy who can play above the rim, you get Aaron Gordon, a guy who can play above the rim. He's not as lanky as Grant is. He's not the shot blocker that Grant is on the other side. And he's not quite the three-point shooter either, but he can give you a little bit of all of those things. And again, it's a guy who can run the floor. You can play a little bit of offense through him. We still really don't know what Aaron Gordon is, and I'm not sure we ever will find out beyond just solid NBA player. But Paul Millsap's best days are clearly behind him. JaMychal Green is a good, solid rotation level guy, but he's not a starter. And now to be able to trot out Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. next to Nikola Jokic, a guy who's going to make their life so easy with passes to a cutting Aaron Gordon or to a spotting up Porter, it really adds some dynamicism to what Denver does. And again, I've got to mention this too. JaVale McGee winding up in Denver. That is a huge upgrade as the backup behind Jokic, where before it was Ball, who's not NBA ready, and Isaiah Hartenstein, who may or may not actually be an NBA player. Again, McGee, a battle-tested guy, a guy who can come in and play 15 minutes because that's all he's going to get behind Jokic, but is going to block some shots, is going to be grittier than what they had before, and I think has done very well to carve out a second half of his career as like a solid rotation center on playoff teams. Like, remember, JaVale McGee was kind of a bonehead early in his career and just would make boneheaded plays where you're just scratching your head all the time. But instead, like, he has become a very solid, reliable guy, and he is perfect for what the Denver Nuggets need. And it's a testament to McGee that he would have been perfect for like 8 other playoff teams who were in the hunt for some reinforcements.
Yeah, and if, by the way, now's a good time to sort of bet on some of these new teams because we kind of don't know yet, so maybe we can get some good value. And if you want to use some of that good value, Joel, we know a good place if you want to look at some future bets or any other bets that you can use thanks to another partner we have here, thanks to the Brawl Network.
Yeah, absolutely. And DraftKings has been such a phenomenal sponsor for us. They've got all those opportunities that you just mentioned when it comes to betting NBA. They also have betting for this little thing called March Madness, which I hear is still going on. Thanks to that partnership with DraftKings, you can take your best shot at picking a matchup with 100-1 odds, which I also hear is pretty good. Now through the national title game, which, by the way, is April 5th. So you got about a week left here. DraftKings will be offering 100-1 odds on any matchup through the tip-off of the national championship. Just go to dkng.co/Brawl March. Again, that's a little bit of a different link than we normally share. Please use it. dkng.co/Brawl March. Head over to their sportsbook promos page, click Boost the Event, and you'll be on your way. Again, dkng.co/Brawl March for your chance at 100-1 odds. Eligibility restrictions apply. Offer ends April 5th at tip-off of the national championship game.
Yes, sir. By the way, I had Gonzaga -13 against Creighton as we were recording, and they rolled. They're fine. They won.
You're pretty good at this stuff. So
I gotta be honest with you. Like, I started. I don't want to tell people what to do or anything, but like I started like DraftKings does this cool thing where like they'll send you like constantly like boosts, like you're talking about, or promos and stuff that you can use, not just new users, as you are a current user. And I used one of those and sort of bankrolled it into Well, I've got commas in my bankroll now, so let's just.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a lot of Manscaped products right there, especially at 20% off.
It is. Now I have to drive.
Commas.
I have to drive to Tennessee to make the best, but whatever. But that's not the case if you want to do the DraftKings daily fantasy. In Alabama,
Right.
that is legal. You can just pick a group of players and get all crunky crunk. Okay, so these next little bit, I want to ask some of these sort of as we go, right? We can rapid fire a few of these because, like I said, there were a ton of deals.
So many.
But a ton of deals with legitimate implications with what's going on for the rest of the season. And I want to ask you about Miami, because Miami now has Victor Oladipo on their team. And Miami is one of those teams that warmed up at the end of last year, was very slow to start this season, but seems to be playing better and better now. And it's one of those teams that, like, if they could just get into the playoffs and get on, be warmed up by the time they get to the playoffs, they're going to be a dangerous out, and they look like that they're gearing up to be another dangerous out.
Absolutely. And what is Victor Oladipo's long-term future in Miami? It's unclear. He's got a new contract coming up. He's dealt with injury issues. He was very worthy of that max contract when he first got to Indiana. And Miami, of course, has some pretty good shooting guards that play Oladipo's position. There's that Tyler Hero guy, Duncan Robinson, not too shabby, and Kendrick Nunn, who I think is going to wind up being the odd man out and probably winds up on a different team here. But, you know, Jimmy Butler plays some of that position too. You still got Goran Dragic in the guard rotation. Andre Iguodala still gets some minutes. And Miami picked up Trevor Ariza at the deadline, or right before the deadline as well. So Oladipo just fits with that DNA, though, right? And kind of an interchangeable guy who's smart. He's been a hard worker. He's been a really good defender. Yeah, he's had some injury issues, but Miami gets him on the cheap. And I just think he's going to fit in with that culture so well that not only will Miami figure out the money to keep him, but Oladipo probably takes a massive pay cut to stay in Miami and help that team. And you're right. Like, if he's right, if he's anywhere near healthy, which we saw in fits and spurts coming back to Indiana, and we saw a little bit in Houston, although the ability to play every night is not there yet. But if he's right by the playoffs, or even at 80%, you are absolutely correct that Miami becomes, again, a dangerous sleeper upset type of team, because they're well drilled, they're talented, and they just go after you. And it does take it takes a little pressure off of Jimmy Butler, because you've got Bam Adebayo that you can definitely run stuff through. Butler's still your closer, but Oladipo has had closer duties before and has done fine in that. And now all of a sudden he's a threat. Tyler Hero's a threat. You have to stick a defender in Duncan Robinson's hip pocket at all times when he's on the court. Like, it just makes Miami that much more dangerous. I want to give a shout out to them too. Like, as much as I thought that they got good minutes and he made sense, Kelly Olynyk as a stretchy guy, I think they quietly upgraded bringing in Nemanja Bjelica from the Sacramento Kings, who is able to shoot the ball like Olynyk does. He's not as big, but he's a really savvy player. He's already in his early 30s, but he was one of Europe's best players. He had some good minutes with the Timberwolves. He had some good minutes with the Sacramento Kings. And I think he's going to be like sneaky effective there as a guy who just makes the right play and then hits corner threes. Just another weapon, and Miami goes under the radar there. And I got to say it, LaMarcus Aldridge, you would have been smarter to go to Miami than Brooklyn. I know Brooklyn may get you the ring, but Miami is still a sleeper, and you would have had better minutes and more impact in Miami.
Could you pronounce his name again?
Nemanja Bjelica.
Man. Kudos to you, Joel Cortez. That is
I only know this because he played with the Timberwolves, and you know, you have to learn the pronunciation. He was a guy, though, and again, I'm getting off track, but he was a guy that the Wolves should not have gotten rid of, even as a losing team. Like, he was a veteran that was super helpful. And same thing happened to him in Sacramento. They're going younger. They're in that rebuild. He is a veteran that deserves to be on a winning team, and I think he's going to give them some unheralded but very appreciated minutes.
Speaking of vets, the 76ers get George Hill for Tony Bradley. It's part of a three-way deal with the Knicks and OKC. George Hill for Tony Bradley, Terrence Ferguson, and 2 future round picks. Austin Rivers goes to OKC. The Knicks do some damage in there too, so they had gotten Terrence Ferguson. But as of, I think it was earlier today, Austin Rivers was waived by OKC. So, and I want to talk about Philly more importantly than OKC, but can I just mention this stat that I found?
Please.
Oklahoma City, over the next 7 years, has 34 protected draft picks. 34.
And they already have more promising young guys than they know what to do with. You're going to have to create 3 G League teams and just attach it to Oklahoma City. It's dangerous how much talent they could have, because how are you going to develop all that? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's 7. By the way, it's equal 17 first and second round picks. It's just.
And people said Sam Presti didn't know what he was doing, right?
Dude, Sam Presti is robbing people of picks. Anyway, so what do you think about Philly getting George Hill?
Okay. They were in the running for Kyle Lowry, and supposedly the deal got a little bit too rich for their blood when the Raptors were supposedly wanting Tyrese Maxey and probably Matisse Thybulle, 2 guys who definitely fit into Philly's plans, and Kyle Lowry as a veteran who certainly is a very good player, but is on the back 9 of his career and is a free agent after this year. I understand why Philly decided, we don't really need to do that. George Hill is smart. He makes the right plays. I still don't know how much he really has left in the tank. He's hurt, and Daryl Morey said, what did he say? He said basically we're getting him for the playoffs. Absolutely.
He's missed a bunch of games, thumb surgery, blah blah blah. So he's not playing now, but he basically is going to be he's a piece for the playoffs.
He's insurance, because Shake Milton is playing well. Maxey has looked okay in his minutes he's got. Seth Curry is back, but has been injured a little bit. Furkan Korkmaz kind of comes and goes. And then you got Danny Green and Matisse Thybulle, who are both good defenders, but they are so streaky on offense. So I think there's a lot of variables in all that depth that Philly has. And George Hill is like the steady guy, the variable that you know what he is when you got to give 10 minutes if some of those other players are maybe not having a great night. I think it gives them the flexibility to put Ben Simmons at one of the forward spots if they need to against certain matchups. They're a little bit, it feels like they're a little bit weak up front, and that's not just because Joel Embiid is gone, and it's not just because Tony Bradley left via trade. Right now, it's just Dwight Howard holding down that spot. So I really do think there's that idea that Ben Simmons in certain matchups can not only play the 4, but maybe even play the 5. And that's why George Hill makes sense there, but he's not an earth mover.
And I briefly want to mention Austin Rivers was waived by OKC. I guess he just wasn't in their future plans. Didn't sort of, I don't know. I mean, when you have 34 picks coming up over the next 7 years, but
he will wind up on a playoff team. And
I was about to say, I read before that the Bucks were the favorite to sort of land him. And if the Bucks get an Austin Rivers, is that a nice pickup for them?
It's a nice pickup again from a depth perspective. But Drew Holiday, Dante DiVincenzo, Pat Connaughton, and Bryn Forbes, that's your top 4 guys in the backcourt, and you've got Chris Middleton at the small forward. But the backup small forward, is that going to be PJ Tucker? Austin Rivers gives you another body and another option in that. One team that kind of shuffled bodies, and I want to talk about them for a moment.
Sure.
The Portland Trailblazers getting Norman Powell from the Toronto Raptors, who did not do a full blow up like the Orlando Magic. They held on to Kyle Lowry.
We're gonna mention that in a minute.
Yeah, but Powell really has had a couple of nice seasons. Really savvy guy, 4-year college player. But I don't know how you feel about this. Like swapping Gary Trent and Rodney Hood for him. on a team that has injury issues and has historically had injury issues with this core. Like, Norman Powell absolutely is an upgrade as a two-way player, but to get rid of two usable guys for one, I'm not sure how I feel about that for Portland, Arky.
I wouldn't have done it. But actually, that was one of the many. I wouldn't say there was many. There's a few head scratchers. I think when I read that Orlando was sort of blowing everything up and that Chicago started the thing. That was my first like, oh, okay, Billy Dunn. Okay, all right, you're working on something. I see upgrades, sure, and I see it. And then I think that was probably a second one that I didn't love, I didn't like, wouldn't have done. But
like Rodney Hood gave them good replacement level minutes. Again, kind of like a George Hill. You know what you're going to get, and it's good enough. But Gary Trent was kind of an offensive flamethrower for them. And I think they looked at the fact that he's hot and cold. He needs the ball in his hands. He does a lot of the same things that you get from CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. Right. But the thing is, like, both of those two guys have missed time. And when you could plug in Gary Trent, he did all that. Whereas Norman Powell is like that two-way player. You know?
And I don't know what that does for you, especially near term. Like how that's going to, why that's a move that had to be made.
I mean, I will say this, like, Gary Trent did not have a path to a starting job in Portland because he is a little bit undersized. And when McCollum is there, you can't play all three of those guys together. So a starting five, if healthy, of Lillard, McCollum, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, and then Yusuf Nurkic. And you're going to bring Simons, Derek Jones Jr., Carmelo, Zach Collins, and Enes Kanter off the bench. Like, if healthy, that 9 can go against anybody's 9. And have like a puncher's chance to win a series. Like, they really can't.
Yeah.
But when that injury happens, is Norman Powell enough to overcome the fact that now you're only 8 deep, whereas when you had Trent and Rodney Hood, you're 9 deep? They have to be betting that somebody out of that group, it must be Simons or CJ Ellaby, somebody out of that group, maybe even Nasir Little, like, is ready for a bigger role, and so they can overcome the fact that they lose 2 players for 1.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I can see it with what you're arguing, Joel. I just don't agree with it. I if I'm constructing that team, I don't do that. I don't do that. In fact, there's I just wouldn't have done it, man. I don't know what to say. Like, you didn't need to, like, because here's how I look at the West. Okay, right? If you had stood pat, right, and did not make that move, you look at a very shaky top of the West. If you do not quite believe in Phoenix yet, the Lakers clearly are damaged goods right now. Who knows what you're going to get when you're going to get deep to a deep series? We'll talk about them in a minute. But do you like the Clippers and Rajon Rondo? Does that help them at all? Does that make them any more difficult? We saw what kind of choking dogs they were last year. You look at Denver, you look at Utah.
And Utah, you go, Utah and Denver, very, very good, but can they be beat? Yeah, I think so, right? They can be beat by the right team in the right moment.
So that roster, as currently constructed by Portland, I think you have to feel pretty good about any matchup you would have had, even if it was a 1 versus 8 and you're the 8. Right? Like, if you really don't trust Phoenix or you don't trust Utah or something right now, which a lot of people like Joel Cordes, you yourself, don't quite trust them yet, and you have reason not to, because basically they're going to be a bunch of playoff babies, right? They've just not done this for the majority of their careers.
In Phoenix's case, yeah. In Utah's case, they've been around, but they got to prove that they can, advance to a conference finals now and win it.
Right. That, like, that move's not necessary. I don't think it makes you that much better that it would have advanced you another series further than you could have gotten on your own right now, because I think you're a dangerous team when you get to the playoffs anyway. Portland has shown us that. Portland, as constructed, has shown us they're dangerous when they get to the playoffs.
And yet, Norman Powell has a championship. He's played on the Raptors. He's played in those big moments. Maybe that's the type of experience that that Portland, they wanted a guy like that, again, as a solid two-way player. And Powell and Covington together on the front line, a little bit undersized at each position, but man, that's a savvy group. And here's something else that on the surface doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but when you dig into it, it really is pretty cool. What's a redheaded American guy doing in the country of Chile? Well, he's becoming a star, and you should probably check this out, especially in these days of lockdowns and quarantines when you can't really get out of the house and you want to see what it's like to travel overseas, especially to South America, somewhere really cool. Like Chile is one of the world's like unsung gems of a country. And you can follow, and disclaimer here, he's my cousin, but you can follow my good friend and somebody I started my broadcasting career with. He's down in Chile. His name is John Gross, and he goes by the handle the Chile Gringo. So you got to see the Chile Gringo, and things are blowing up for him because the trips, the travel logs are so cool. He just landed his own TV show, his own national TV show down in Chile, an English-speaking TV show in a Spanish land that predominantly Spanish-speaking, though there's a lot of English speakers there too. But things are blowing up, and you should really check it out. You got to go on Instagram, check out the Chile Gringo, or on YouTube. You can just search Chile Gringo hashtag. That's right. There's a trending hashtag for him, or just search John Gross, and you'll go to his YouTube page. Big things for my man. Couldn't be happier for him. And you got to check it out. Like, and beyond just, the personal connections, Chile is a really, really awesome place, and expand your mind. You can't get out of the house right now. You can't get out of town. You certainly can't travel much overseas, but you can see somebody who's been there for a few years and kind of knows all the secrets.
Yeah, if you just Google the Chile Gringo, the first video that comes up is going home. The Gringo returns to Chile, which is. Can I pause this while we watch the show? Like, is that all right? Not bad. He looks cool. Like, it looks like he's having a lot of fun with it. Like, I have it played on mute right now.
Yeah, so, if you want to see Chile on a one-wheeled scooter, that's kind of a running gag too, is that many of the things are done on a one-wheeled scooter, at least initially. Sometimes in crazy places, like he's zipping around the TV studio as he's going on all these different shows to promote his new show that's landing. It's cool. You got to check it out.
Joel, give me, I got two more topics I want to hit real quick. Give me 3 sentences or less on this next one, and then we can expound just a minute or two on the last one. Rajon Rondo is going to the Clippers. Does Rondo getting back to not only a playoff contender, which Atlanta was developing further into, but the one that is very much built up to try to win a championship, at least that's the whole thought behind the construction of the team. Does that advance them further in your mind as far as how good they are?
Yes, it does, because we don't know when Pat Beverly will actually be back, much less at full strength. So it's been Reggie Jackson holding down the point guard spot, and Lou Williams looks like he's running out of gas. He was not filling that 6-man role anymore, whereas younger guys like Terrence Mann were kind of stepping up into that. So Rondo, as a guy who's gritty, just a smart player and will move the ball but doesn't necessarily need the ball, he does actually improve them.
I think there were a couple of commas in those sentences, but I think I got
semicolons. I'm a former English teacher, man. I know how to do this.
All right. Fair enough. My bad. I should. Okay. Last topic. One prepositional phrase or less. No, we can spend a minute or two on this because I think this is extremely fascinating. The first piece we started talking about moving way back, well over a month ago, was Kyle Lowry. The thought that Masai Ujiri and Toronto may be ready to move on from him. Early on in the day, they looked like they were making some room for players, and Kyle Lowry was definitely on the block. In fact, rumored to have been leaving and being sent somewhere.
Philly or Miami, right?
But that's right. But at the end of all of it, Masai Ujiri did not send Kyle Lowry anywhere. He is still a Toronto Raptor. So thoughts on Kyle Lowry staying and Masai Ujiri hanging on to his bellwether player?
It's obvious that Toronto could not get the package of young players back that they wanted. And if you were looking at Miami, the rumor was they wanted Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. That's not going to happen.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that, and then we talked about with Philly, a couple of younger players in Tyrese Maxey and maybe either Shake Milton or Matisse Thybulle. I think that one would have been more doable, but it could have been a rental. And I understand, like, Kyle Lowry is a guy that plays with the ball in his hands most of the time, but you want the ball in Ben Simmons' hands. So the other dark horse spot was the Lakers, but things were going to be tight cap space wise. And then it was rumored that Dennis Schroeder might be on the move to Toronto, but you would have had to include some other things. And there again, like, is Kyle Lowry an improvement, an upgrade over Schroeder? Yes. But what else do you have to give up in the long-term picture? And a cash-strapped Lakers team that's already not sure if they can re-sign Schroeder, like, that's up in the air. Kyle Lowry is going to want still veteran level money, and are you going to rent him? So I just think that a guy like that who's pushing mid-30s, max level player, and you don't know when the fall off is going to happen, the haul back for that is not as big unless you have a picture perfect location for him, and that did not materialize. And the fact that Lowry is so well loved in Toronto and has been such a good guy for them that Ujiri goes, yeah, I'm not going to get rid of him for nothing. And maybe he still fits into our long-term plans. If he wants an out, though, then he's got his pick of the litter as a free agent, and we let him kind of take the onus there.
I was going to ask you that this feels like, if you're Masai Ujiri, this feels like a legacy keep, right? Because you could have gotten, so Kyle Lowry, despite what the early rumors were, whether or not they were going to send him somewhere, they could have gotten something, right? They may have asked for the moon, and they couldn't even ask. They'd asked well more than the moon, so they were going to land amongst the stars. This is a team that's now 3.5 games, 4 games out of the last playoff spot. They've lost 9 out of their last 10. They're not a team that's ready to compete anymore this year. Like, it feels like that hot stretch they had right when they were rumored Kyle Lowry was going to possibly be moved to the last 3 weeks. Like, and that's including the All-Star day and a half. That, like, that whatever warm streak that they were on, that was just over. This team's just not good enough this year to sort of compete. So this feels like you could have gotten something, but it had to be so much for you to get rid of someone that's so important to the Raptors brand, as opposed to sort of the team itself, right? Like, I feel like more of a important to the brand hire, or keep, I should say, than to the actual product on the court.
And we made the point that Kyle Lowry is the most impactful, most important Toronto Raptor ever. That's, it's more than Vince Carter or Chris Bosh, right? Lowry has a ring. He's stuck there. He went through the whole rebuild. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard had a huge impact, but it was just the 1 year. So I think the ball is going to be in Lowry's court. Not only, it's how does he want the end of his career to be? He could stick around in Toronto and play out the rest of his career there as an idol. Certainly, though, it's going to be going forward, probably the backup or timeshare guy with Fred VanVleet, who is the future at that position for them and is kind of like a Lowry clone when you think about it. But you're going to take backup money to do that. You're going to spot the franchise something in order to have a lengthy deal and to play out the rest of your career in security, kind of the way that Dirk Nowitzki wound down his career with Dallas. Or do you want to chase one last paycheck and the very good chance that you'll sign for pretty decent money on a team that may not be a contender, and you're going to be asked to do more and expected to do more than you'll be able to hold up your end of the contract for. And so the last couple of years of that contract, when you get your money, you're probably going to be in an Al Horford situation where you get moved a couple times and you wind up not playing and maybe a buyout. Is that the way you want things to go? Or do you want to chase a ring, another ring, on a really good team where you're going to take like a vet minimum or a mid-level exception and not play as much? Like, Lowry has earned the right, both in Toronto and from his career, to have that full choice of 3 very different pathways. But he's not getting a ring in Toronto if he stays. But you also have that legacy of, I already got a ring, and like, this is my town, this is my team. I probably will have a position with the organization if I want one when my career is done. Like, that's a really good career at the end of the day if you want it.
It is. Do you think... So there was all the hoopla for Kawhi Leonard, especially after when he was becoming a free agent, after they won the championship. I mean, helicopters were following his cars and things like that, like where he was going to go. But Kyle Lowry obviously wasn't becoming a free agent, so it wasn't sort of that thing. Do you think the association of that championship will be more with Kawhi Leonard than Kyle Lowry? Or is it also one of those things that the further we get out... I mean, is it currently that way now, more Lowry or Kawhi connected? And do you think if that is more Kawhi connected, that the longer he stays with Kyle Lowry, that is, with Toronto, and the further we get from it, that legacy of him possibly staying and being the sort of franchise guy, that it'll be lovingly looked upon as, Kyle Lowry brought us this title. So, Kawhi was nice, but Kyle Lowry's our guy.
When you say who brought us the title, it's a both and. You can't separate the two.
Right, no. But I mean, like, it's just sort of the perception of with the fan base, I should think. Right. Like, do you think which one do you think they feel is more responsible? Not necessarily who is.
It'll be
obviously
Lowry.
They were both very important.
It'll be Lowry. The love will always be greater for Lowry because of the loyalty to stick with it, to put in the work to get to that point. DeMar DeRozan deserves a lot of credit, even though he didn't get a ring, right? Those guys busted their butts to make Toronto a basketball destination and a really good playoff foundation team, good enough that DeRozan was good enough to help land Kawhi Leonard. So, like, that is going to be respected. Obviously, Leonard will play such a big part as the guy who came and put them over the top, but he made the choice to leave, right? He made the choice of his own accord to go somewhere else. So he's an all-time mercenary in a very respectable sense. But that's what he is. Whereas Kyle Lowry, like, he is Toronto Raptors basketball as much as, if not more so, than Vince Carter or Chris Bosh ever was.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair. I just wonder, and if there are any Raptors fans listening, feel free to message us, comment underneath the video on YouTube, whatever. Which do you actually see? Because without Kawhi Leonard, that title doesn't come to Toronto. But also, without Kyle Lowry, does Kawhi come to Toronto? It's one of those very interesting chicken eggs, but which one's the actual chicken and which one's the actual egg kind of conversations to have. So, all right, Joel, I think we're ready for the last 20-25 games of the season. You excited?
We are, and our predictions are going to be tested. I'm excited now. The trade deadline's always fun because you get that reshuffling of the deck, and it's always so interesting to see how rosters work or don't work on paper versus practicality. And that's what we get to see down the stretch during this truncated end of the season. And we got the playoff tournament that is really going to be fun again. I think that's a great idea that I hope they use going forward. So this is cool. It's been awesome. And again, as we put episode 54, the Robert Tractor Trailer episode, to bed, if you're listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, and you want to check out the video version, go to YouTube, just search Basketball by Association or just BbA, and we will pop up. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and I think even more importantly, give us a share. Let people know that you like what you're hearing, and we've all got NBA friends. Let them know what we're up to. We'd really appreciate that. So I appreciate you, Arky, Shea. I appreciate Manscaped, DraftKings. I appreciate the Chile Gringo, and I appreciate Brawl Network.
And I appreciate the fact that the Knicks are also hosting playoff games if we started the playoffs right now.
This is a thing.
Back to the number 4 spots. Hey, listen, maybe what I said about the Hornets was to curse the Hornets so the Knicks could get back there. Maybe that was my long con the whole time.
You understand that perfectly as a betting man.
Maybe it just happened sooner than I was expecting. That's all. Joel, we'll be back for the BbA Bite on Wednesday, so everyone have a fantastic start of your week and enjoy all the new players.